The list slipped from Annabel Sinclair's hand just as the Duke said very quietly, "You will choose my wife." The pages struck the carpet like a scattered sentence. For one dreadful moment neither of them moved. Outside the tall windows of Sterling House, October fog pressed against the glass until Mayfair itself seemed erased. Inside, the fire burned low, and yet the study felt cold enough to preserve every unkind truth. Annabel bent at once to gather the fallen pages. "My apologies, Your Grace." "Do not apologize." His voice remained calm. "Only answer me. Can you do it?" Her fingers closed over a card that bore the name of Lady Catherine Aldridge, 17, pretty, rich, obedient, suitable, so very suitable. Annabel placed it back upon the desk with careful precision, though her pulse had turned wild. "You ask too much of me. I ask exactly what I hired you to do." That hurt because it was true. She rose slowly and at last looked at him. Richard Alcott, Duke of Stirling, stood beside the hearth in dark evening clothes, one hand resting upon the mantel as though even stillness cost him effort. At 34, he was not handsome in the charming manner society preferred. There was nothing easy in his face. His jaw was too severe, his mouth too restrained, his dark blue eyes too watchful. He looked like a man carved by duty and left to harden, feared by half of London, desired by the other half, loved, Annabel suspected, by no one. And now he wished her to place another woman at his side. "The Dowager Duchess wants an heir," Annabel said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "That is not the same as wanting a wife." "No," he answered. "It is not." The honesty of it unsettled her more than anger would have done. On the mahogany desk between them lay the evidence of 3 months' labor, 32 names, fortunes, family lines, whispered assessments, private observations no drawing room would ever admit aloud. She had arranged each one with her own hand. She had reduced living women into columns of merit and suitability, and all for the one man who could never look at her and see possibility. He came nearer then, not enough to breach propriety, only enough to make the room feel altered. "You know what this house requires," he said. "You know what I cannot endure." Annabel gave a faint, brittle laugh. "A timid girl with a dowry, an excellent pedigree, and no troublesome opinions?" Something shifted in his gaze. "You know very well I would send such a girl away within a week. And yet that is what society expects. I am weary of what society expects." The words fell into the silence and remained there. Annabel lowered her eyes first. She always did. Not because she was weak, but because women in her position learned early which risks were survivable and which were not. At 26, Miss Annabel Sinclair had lived too long at the edges of gentility to mistake kindness for freedom. Her late uncle had been a baronet of dwindling means. Her childhood had been respectable only from a distance. No dowry, no beauty worth remarking upon, no mother to negotiate for her. No father left powerful enough to insist she be seen. When Sir Geoffrey died 6 months earlier and left her nearly penniless, the Duke's mother had offered employment instead of pity. 3 months of wages, a room in the servants' wing, and the peculiar task of helping a duke acquire a duchess as one acquired a carriage horse, discreetly, efficiently, and without public spectacle. So Annabel had done what she always did. She had made herself useful. Invisible women survived by being useful. Yet there were moments, few, treacherous, impossible, when invisibility felt less like safety and more like burial. She had noticed those moments most often in this room, the way the Duke never raised his voice, yet could freeze a corridor with a glance, in the way he seemed to listen when she spoke, as though her mind were of greater interest than her station, in the way loneliness lived in him so openly that she sometimes felt ashamed for recognizing it because she carried its twin, Miss Sinclair. His voice drew her back. She realized with alarm that he was waiting for her answer. Annabel folded her hands before her so he would not see them tremble. "If I choose wrongly, Your Grace." His expression did not change. "Then it will be No worse than if I choose for myself. She should have laughed. She should have reminded him that this was absurd, that no respectable arrangement could place such power in the hands of an unmarried gentlewoman with no fortune and no name strong enough to protect her. Instead, she heard herself ask, "And what, precisely, am I choosing?" For the first time that evening, something unguarded crossed his face. "Not a beauty," he said. "Not a hostess, not a girl dazzled by rank." His gaze held hers too, direct, too grave. "Choose the woman who could remain in this house and not come to hate me." The room went still. Annabelle's breath caught. Because that was no ordinary instruction. That was confession disguised as practicality, and it was dangerous. Dangerous because she knew, before she looked down at the list again, that there was not one name upon it she trusted with that answer. Not one. Not. The first interview began at 10, beneath chandeliers that glittered like silent witnesses. Annabelle stood beside the long windows of the blue drawing room, her notebook open, her expression composed into perfect neutrality. Outside, the fog still clung stubbornly to Mayfair, turning the world pale and distant. Inside, everything was arranged for inspection, including the woman who had come to be judged. Lady Catherine Aldridge, Annabelle said softly. The girl curtsied, her hands trembling just enough to betray her youth. 17. Too young for such rooms, too young for such silences. Please be seated. Lady Catherine obeyed at once, smoothing her pale gown with nervous care. Her eyes moved around the room, taking in the heavy drapes, the polished furniture, the absence of warmth. Annabelle recognized that look. It was the look of someone who expected admiration and found something colder instead. His Grace will join us shortly, Annabelle added. The girl brightened. Oh, I have heard so much. The door opened. The Duke entered without announcement. Everything changed. He did not look at Annabelle first. He looked at the candidate, his expression unreadable, his presence filling the room with something heavier than authority, something closer to judgment. Lady Catherine rose too quickly. Your Grace. He inclined his head, nothing more. Sit. She did. He did not. Instead, he remained near the fireplace, one hand resting lightly against the mantel, as though he had no intention of making this easy for anyone. Annabelle began. Lady Catherine, may I ask how you imagine life at Stirling House? The girl smiled, relieved to speak. Oh, I should be delighted to receive guests, of course. I adore balls, and Mama says the house is quite grand. There are no balls, the Duke said. The interruption was quiet, absolute. Lady Catherine faltered. I beg your pardon? I do not host, he continued. I do not attend. Stirling. House is not lively. The word sounded almost unfamiliar in his mouth. The girl's smile weakened. She glanced just once toward Annabelle. Annabelle did not rescue her. She could not. And how do you spend your days, Your Grace? Lady Catherine asked, attempting brightness. In silence. The answer landed without mercy. Annabelle saw it. Then, the precise moment the girl understood she had stepped into something she could not charm. Still, the interview continued. It had to. Questions of household management, of education, of expectations. Lady Catherine answered as she had been taught, her voice growing smaller with each passing moment. When it ended, the Duke dismissed her with polite indifference. Days. Door closed. Silence followed. Annabelle did not look at him immediately. She wrote one final note, her handwriting steady despite the tightness in her chest. Unsuitable, she said at last. I did not ask. No, she agreed quietly. But you will. He turned then, studying her with that same unsettling focus. Why? Annabelle closed the notebook. Because she will be afraid of you, she said simply. And fear does not endure. It either turns into obedience or resentment, and which is worse? For a man such as you. Annabel met his gaze. Resentment. Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly to name. Next, he said, Miss Louisa Hargrove arrived at noon. Older, composed, intelligent enough to mask her uncertainty. Annabel saw promise in her at once. This time, the Duke sat. This time, he listened. When Miss Hargrove spoke of books, of education in France, of her enjoyment of philosophy, something almost like interest appeared in his eyes. Annabel felt it. Not warmth, but recognition. "Do you believe marriage should involve companionship?" he asked. Miss Hargrove hesitated only briefly. "I believe it should involve mutual respect, Your Grace." A careful answer. Too careful. "And if respect is all that is offered?" he pressed. She smiled faintly. "Then one must be content with it." The words were correct. Perfect, empty. Annabel knew it the moment they were spoken. So did he. The interview ended sooner than it should have. When the door closed behind Miss Hargrove, the Duke remained seated, his gaze fixed on nothing. She would do, Annabel said. Yes, but he did not sound convinced. Then why dismiss her? She asked quietly. He looked up. Because she would survive me, he said. But she would never see me. Annabel stilled. The honesty of it struck deeper than any cruelty. And you require to be seen? She asked before she could stop. Herself. His eyes met hers. Dark. Searching. For once, he said. The room shifted. Annabel felt it like a change in air. Dangerous. Immediate. She lowered her gaze at once, retreating into the only safety she possessed. Professional distance. There is one final candidate today, she said, her voice carefully controlled. Lady Philippa Crowe. The Duke rose slowly. Ambitious, he said. Yes. She wants the title. Yes. And what do you think she will do with it? Annabel hesitated, then answered. She will use it well, she said. But she will never belong to this house. Why? Annabel looked toward the tall windows, where fog still blurred the world beyond. Because she will always need to be seen by others, she said softly, and this house does not offer that. Silence fell again. He stepped closer. Not too close. Never improper. But close enough that she could feel the weight of his attention. And you understand that? He asked. Annabel's breath caught. She should have denied it. She should have stepped back. She did neither. Yes, she said. The word barely existed, and yet it changed everything. Lady Philippa Crowe arrived precisely at 3. She did not tremble. She did not hesitate. She entered the blue drawing room as though it already belonged to her. Annabel noticed it at once. The confidence, the deliberate elegance, the way her gaze moved not with curiosity but with quiet calculation. This was a woman who understood society as a game and intended to win. Lady Philippa, Annabel greeted. Miss Sinclair. The acknowledgement was polite but not warm. Philippa's attention shifted almost immediately toward the Duke. Your Grace. Richard inclined his head. Nothing. More. Sit. She did gracefully, her posture perfect, her hands resting lightly in her lap as though she had practiced the exact angle. Annabel opened her notebook. Lady Philippa, may I ask what you expect from marriage? The answer came without hesitation. Position, stability, influence, no blush, no pretense. Annabel's pen paused. And from your husband? Philippa smiled faintly. Respect, discretion, cooperation. Richard's gaze sharpened slightly. Nothing more? He asked. Philippa met his eyes directly. Anything more would be inefficient. Silence followed, not awkward, measured. Annabel felt it. This was not a girl to be unsettled. Not easily. Do you value affection? The Duke asked. Philippa tilted her head. I value harmony, Your Grace. Affection is unpredictable. And if harmony is not offered, then I create it. The confidence in her voice was not arrogance. It was certainty. Annabelle felt something tighten in her chest because for the first time that day, she could see why this woman would be chosen. Not because she was gentle, but because she would not break. Sterling House is not a place of constant society, Annabelle said carefully. There are long periods without entertainment, without visitors. I would change that, Philippa interrupted. The words landed cleanly. Richard stilled. You would? He asked. Yes. She smiled, composed. A house of your standing should not exist in silence. It invites speculation. Weakness. Something dark flickered in his expression. This house does not concern itself with speculation. Perhaps it should. The air shifted. Dangerous now. Annabelle saw it. The moment this ceased to be an interview and became a challenge. Philippa continued, unaware or unconcerned. With proper management, she said, Sterling House could become the center of influence in London. Your position, my position is secure. Richard cut in. His voice was still calm, but colder. Philippa paused for the first time. Annabelle closed her notebook slowly. She already knew. The rest no longer mattered. Thank you, Lady Philippa, Annabelle said, her tone smooth, final. That will be all. The young woman rose, composed even in dismissal. Your Grace. She curtsied, then she left. The door closed. Silence returned. Heavy, absolute. Annabelle did not speak at once. She allowed the quiet to settle as she had learned he preferred. Then, she is the strongest candidate, she said. Yes, but you will not choose her. A pause. No. Annabelle looked at him then. Because she would try to change you. Richard's gaze met hers. And this house, he added. And you do not wish to be changed. Something sharper entered his voice. No. The word echoed. Firm, uncompromising. Annabelle lowered her eyes. Then there are no suitable candidates. The truth stood between them, unavoidable now. Richard moved away from the fireplace, crossing the room with slow, deliberate steps. He stopped, near the window, looking out into the endless gray of London. For 3 months, he said quietly, you have given me perfection. Annabelle's fingers tightened around her notebook. And yet, he continued, none of it is right. She said nothing, because she could not, because she understood too well. You see it, he said. It was not a question. Annabelle forced herself to answer. Yes. What do you see, Miss Sinclair? Her heart began to race. This was the moment she had avoided, the moment where honesty became dangerous. I see, she said slowly, that you are not searching for a wife. He turned, fully now, his eyes locked onto hers. What am I searching for? Annabelle swallowed. She could feel the line, the one she must not cross. And yet, you are searching for someone, she said. Who will remain? Silence. Deep. Unforgiving. And, what does that mean? He asked, his voice lower now. Annabelle held his gaze. It means, she said, someone who understands exactly what this life is, and does not ask you to become anything else. A long pause. Then, and you believe, such a woman exists? The question struck harder than it should have. Annabelle felt it in her chest, in her throat, in the quiet, unbearable truth she had carried for weeks. Yes, she said. His gaze sharpened. Where? Annabelle looked down. Because for the first time, she did not trust herself to lie. The letter slipped from between the pages just as he closed her notebook. It landed at his feet. Annabelle's breath stopped. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. Then the Duke bent. Your Greg, too late. He had already picked it up. The paper was worn, folded too many times, the edges softened by years of handling. Not part of the list, not meant for him, not meant for anyone in this house. Annabelle felt heat rise sharply along her throat. Please, she said, quieter now. That is private. He did not open it. Not yet. But he did not give it back either. His gaze moved over the folded page, over the careful crease, the way it had been kept, not discarded. Someone wrote to you, he said. It was not a question. Annabelle forced her hands to remain still at her sides. Yes. A promise? Her silence answered for her. Something shifted in his expression, not anger, not curiosity alone. Something more restrained, more dangerous. He unfolded the letter. Just enough. His eyes moved once across the ink, then stopped. Annabelle could hear her own heartbeat now, loud, unsteady, impossible to hide. Wait for me, he read quietly. The words hung in the room like a memory that had never been allowed to die. He folded the letter again, carefully, too carefully, and placed it on the desk between them. I should not have read it, he said. But he did not sound as though he regretted it. Annabelle stepped forward, taking the letter at once, holding it as though it were something fragile, or something that might vanish if she did not. It was written 6 years ago, she said. Why she said it she did not know. Perhaps because silence now felt more dangerous than truth. He watched her. Does he still expect you to wait? The question was too direct, too close. Annabelle closed her eyes for the briefest moment. No. Why not? Because he is gone. Because promises do not always return. Because some futures end before they begin. She opened her eyes again. Because I no longer belong to that life. It was not a lie. But it was not the whole truth either. The Duke studied her in silence. You kept it? Yes. Why? Annabelle hesitated, then answered. Because it was the only time someone chose me. The words left her before she could stop them. The room changed. Richard did not move. But something in him did. You speak of it as though it matters still, he said. It does not. Then why keep it? Annabelle tightened her grip on the paper. Because letting it go would mean admitting that nothing had ever come after it. Because it was proof that once, even briefly, she had not been invisible. She lifted her chin slightly. Because some things, she said quietly, are not kept for hope. They are kept for remembrance. Silence fell again. But it was no longer empty. It was filled with something neither of them had intended to reveal. He turned away first. Crossed to the window. Placed distance between them. Annabelle exhaled slowly as though she had been holding her breath for far too long. You will continue with the remaining candidates, he said, his voice returning to its usual control. Reduce the list further. There are only 9 left. Then make it 3. 3. The final selection, the final narrowing, the final step toward choosing another woman. Annabelle nodded. Yes, Your Grace. He did not look back at her. Choose carefully. The words sounded different now, not like an order, like something heavier. Annabelle gathered her notebook, her papers, her composure, and turned toward the door. Miss Sinclair. She stopped, her hand still on the handle. Yes, Your Grace? A pause. Longer than it should have been. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. More human. You said someone chose you once. Annabelle's fingers tightened. Yes. And if he had returned? The question struck deep. Too deep, she did not turn. I would not be here. Another silence, then I see. But he did not. Not yet. Annabelle left the room before he could ask anything more. That evening, London whispered. It always did, even without invitations, even without announcements. Names traveled quietly through drawing rooms and carriage rides, carried in glances, in pauses, in the subtle absence of certain young women from society's routines. The Duke of Stirling was choosing a wife. No one had seen the candidates. No one had been invited, and yet everyone knew. Annabel sat alone in the library, the reduced list before her, 9 names now, and falling. She crossed one out, then another. Each line felt heavier than the last, not because the women were unworthy, but because none of them were right. None of them would stay, not in the way he meant, not in the way she understood. Her pen hovered over the next name, then stopped. A thought, dangerous, unwanted, undeniable, slipped through her carefully built restraint. You know who would remain. Annabel shut the notebook at once, too hard, too fast, as if the thought itself were something that could be contained, denied, erased. But it did not leave, because, for the first time, the list no longer felt like a selection, it felt like a lie. The Dowager Duchess arrived without warning, not in a carriage announced by servants, not with polite notice, but as a presence that entered Sterling House and altered it at once. Annabel felt it before she saw her. The silence changed, sharpened, disciplined. By the time Annabel reached the main corridor, the household was already arranged into obedience. Footmen stood straighter, voices lowered. Even the air seemed to wait. Then, "She has returned early." The words passed between servants like a quiet alarm. Annabel's stomach tightened. 3 weeks, she had said. 3. It had been barely 10 days. Annabel turned toward the drawing room and stopped. The door stood open. Inside, the Dowager Duchess of Sterling stood at the center of the room, still in her traveling cloak, her posture flawless despite the journey. Age had not softened her. If anything, it had refined her into something sharper, controlled, impeccable, dangerous, and beside her, the Duke, standing very still. "Miss Sinclair," the Duchess said without looking at her. Annabel stepped forward at once and curtsied. "Your Grace." The older woman's gaze moved over her slowly, assessing, not her dress, not her posture. Her Annabel felt it like a blade drawn lightly across her skin. "You have been efficient," the Duchess said. "Not praise, never praise. I fulfill my duties." "So, I see." A pause. Then with perfect calm, "You have reduced the list?" "Yes, Your Grace." "To how many?" 5. The Duchess's brow lifted slightly. "Still too many." Annabel did not answer. She could not. The Duke spoke instead. "They will be reduced further this week." The Duchess turned to him. And then, silence. Richard did not respond immediately. Annabel felt the weight of it, because there was no answer he could give that would satisfy both truth and expectation. "And then," the Duchess continued smoothly, "you will choose." Yes, the word was quiet, final, but something in it lacked certainty. The Duchess noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. Her gaze shifted again to Annabel. "You will prepare the final interviews," she said. "I will attend." Annabel inclined her head. "Yes, Your Grace." "And Miss Sinclair?" Annabel stilled. "Yes?" A faint pause. Measured. "Do remember your place in this matter." The words were soft, almost gentle, but they landed harder than any raised voice. Annabel lowered her gaze. "I always do." "Good." The Duchess turned away, already finished with her, already dismissing her, as though she were nothing more than a tool that had served its purpose. Annabel stepped back, left the room, but the words remained. Your place. She knew her place. She had always known. That was why this hurt. By evening, the house no longer felt the same. It never did, once the Duchess returned. Where the Duke's silence was heavy, his mother's was precise. Where he withdrew, she controlled. Annabel sat in the library, the final 5 names before her, 5 women, 5 futures. None of them hers. Her pen moved. One name, gone. Another, gone. 3 remained. Her hand stopped, because now it mattered. Not just for him, for her, because when this was finished, she would leave, return to whatever quiet, invisible life awaited her beyond Sterling House. He would marry. She would disappear. That was how it had always been meant to end. So why? Why did it feel like loss? Annabelle pressed her fingers lightly against her temple. This was foolish, unnecessary. She had done nothing wrong. She had not overstepped, had not imagined anything that had not been given. And yet, she remembered the way he had looked at her, not as a duke, not as a master, but as a man who saw something dangerous, something real. Her breath caught. She forced it steady. This must end. Now. Her pen lowered. She crossed out another name, then another. 2 remained. She stared at them. Longer than she should have, then without thinking she whispered it. They will not stay. The words barely existed, but they were true, because she knew. She knew the house. She knew him. She knew the silence that lived between those walls, and she knew no one on that list would choose it. Not truly. Not willingly. Not without breaking. Annabelle closed her eyes, and for the first time, she allowed herself to admit it. Not fully, not completely, but enough to feel the weight of it, if anyone would remain. It would be her. Her eyes opened at once, sharp, alarmed. No, that was not a thought she could keep. Not here, not now, not ever. She closed the notebook, firmly, as though that could end it, as though that could silence something that had already begun. Later, that night in his study, the Duke of Sterling stood alone. The fire burned low, unattended. Before him, the list lay open, reduced, refined, almost finished, and yet, for the first time, it felt entirely wrong. His fingers moved slowly across the names, not choosing, not deciding, only searching for something that was not written there, something that had never been written there. His jaw tightened, because he knew it with a certainty he could no longer ignore. The problem was not the list. It never had been. The problem was the only woman who understood him, the only one who would remain, was the one he was never meant to choose. The final interviews began under her gaze. The Dowager Duchess did not sit. She presided. In the blue drawing room, beneath the cold shimmer of chandeliers, she stood near the fireplace as though the entire house arranged itself by her will alone. Every chair had been moved a fraction, every detail corrected. Even the flowers Annabelle had placed that morning had been adjusted, less modest, more deliberate. Annabelle stood beside the writing table, her notebook open, her posture exact, invisible. Except, she was not. Not today. She felt it in the way the Duchess's eyes returned to her, not openly, not rudely, but with the quiet insistence of a woman measuring something she had not yet named. "Miss Caroline Whitley," Annabelle announced. The young woman entered with careful composure, her pale blue gown modest but elegant, her movements restrained by awareness. She curtsied first to the Duchess, then to the Duke. The order mattered. Everything did. "Proceed," the Duchess said. Annabelle began the questions, her voice steady, her tone professional. Household management. Expectations. Conduct. Caroline answered well, sensibly, without error, perfectly. The Duchess approved. Annabelle saw it in the slight incline of her head, in the absence of interruption, in the stillness that meant satisfaction. The Duke said nothing. When it ended, Caroline was dismissed with polite acknowledgement. The door closed. "She will do," the Duchess said at once. Annabelle's pen paused. There, it was, the decision, clean and effortless, suitable, acceptable, approved. She did not look at the Duke. She could not. "And the second?" the Duchess asked. "Mrs. Jane Thornton," Annabel replied. The widow entered quietly. Darker dress. No ornament, no attempt to charm. Her curtsy was correct. Nothing more. The interview unfolded differently. Jane Thornton did not offer brightness. She offered truth. "I do not expect affection," she said calmly. "Only clarity." The Duchess watched her with sharper interest. "And if clarity is not given," she asked, "then I will create it for myself." There was strength there, not ambition, endurance. Annabel felt it immediately. So did he. She did not look at him, but she felt the shift. When the interview ended, Jane left without hope, without fear, without illusion. Silence returned. "She is less agreeable," the Duchess said. "She is honest," the Duke replied. "That is not always desirable. It is necessary." The Duchess turned her gaze to him. "And which do you intend to choose?" The room held its breath. Annabel lowered her eyes to her notebook, though she could no longer read the words. This was it. The moment. The decision. Everything she had worked toward. Everything she had prepared. Everything she had told herself she could endure, balanced on what he would say next. "She will do," the Duchess continued, referring again to Miss Whitley. "There is no reason to delay further. No reason, except the truth." The Duke did not answer. Annabel's pulse began to rise, slow, unsteady, because she knew that silence. It was not hesitation. It was resistance. "Richard," the Duchess said, sharper now. He turned slightly. Not toward her, toward Annabel. Just for a moment. But it was enough. Too much. Because there was no distance in that look now. No indifference, no safety. Only something raw, unresolved. "Your Grace," Annabel said softly. Forcing herself to speak before that moment became something else. Something impossible. "Miss Whitley meets every requirement. She would be an excellent Duchess." Her voice did not break. She would not allow it. The Duchess nodded, satisfied. "Then it is settled." "No." The word cut through the room. Quiet, but absolute. The Duchess stilled. Annabel's breath caught. Richard stepped forward. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with a certainty that changed everything. "It is not settled," he said. The Duchess's gaze sharpened. "You refuse a suitable match?" "I refuse an empty one." The silence turned dangerous. "You are not a young man choosing sentiment," she said coldly. "You are a duke. You will act accordingly." "I am acting accordingly." "No," she replied. "You are hesitating." Annabel felt something tighten in her chest. This was wrong. This was unraveling. He was pushing too far. "You will choose one of these women," the Duchess continued. "Or I will choose for you." A pause. Final, controlled. Annabel closed her notebook slowly. This was the end. It had to be. She stepped forward slightly. "Your Grace," she said, addressing him, though she could feel the Duchess's attention, sharpen instantly. "The decision must be made." He looked at her, only her. "Yes," he said quietly, "it must." The words should have restored order, should have ended this, should have placed everything back where it belonged. Instead, they broke something, because in that moment, Annabel saw it. Not doubt, not reluctance, but conflict. And something deeper. Something far more dangerous. He was not choosing between women. He was choosing between truth and the world that would not allow it. Annabel lowered her gaze, because she could not bear to see which he would choose. The silence broke not with his voice, but with his movement. Richard Alcott, Duke of Stirling, did not turn toward the candidates. He did not look to his mother. He walked, past the table, past the list, past every expectation placed upon him, and stopped before Annabel, too close, too deliberate. The room stilled. Richard, the Duchess warned. He did not answer her. His gaze never left Annabel. Look at me, Miss Sinclair. Her breath faltered. She should not. She could not, and yet she did. Slowly, reluctantly, as though meeting his eyes would undo everything she had spent her life building. You said, he began, his voice low, controlled, but no longer distant, that I am searching for someone who will remain. Annabel's hands tightened at her sides. Yes, Your Grace. And you said such a woman exists. A pause. Her voice came softer now. Yes. Then answer me this. He stepped closer. Just enough. Why is she not on the list? The question struck like truth-given form. The Duchess moved, sharp, precise. This has gone far enough. It has not, he replied. Still not looking away from Annabel. Still not stepping back. Annabel's heart pounded now, too loud, too visible. You must not do this, she said under her breath. It was not defiance. It was fear. For you. She meant, for him. For everything this would destroy. But he heard something else. I must, he said, and then, without turning, he spoke to the room. There will be no Duchess chosen from this list. The words landed like a verdict. The Duchess went still. Cold. Unyielding. You will regret this, she said. Perhaps. Society will not accept it. I am not asking society. Then what are you asking? Only then. Only final did he answer. I am asking her. The room shifted. Everything in it. Because now there was no distance left, no disguise, no retreat. Annabel felt it in her bones, in the way the air seemed to close around them, in the way every unspoken moment between them now stood exposed. Miss Sinclair, he said, not Your Grace, not my secretary, her name, her. Do you remain in this house because you must? She shook her head before she could stop herself. No. Then why? Her throat tightened, because she had never said it aloud. Never. Allowed it to take shape, and now there was no escape. Because I choose to, she whispered. Even knowing what it is? Yes. Even knowing what I am? Her breath trembled. Yes. The word broke something open. In him. In her. In everything. Then hear me clearly, he said, his voice steadier now, stronger. I do not want a wife chosen for me. A pause. Want the one who already chose to stay. The Duchess stepped forward. No. But it was too late, because he had already crossed the line that could not be undone. Annabel Sinclair, he said. And for the first time, there was no title between them, no barrier, no protection, only truth. You are the only one who understood what this house is. His gaze held hers, unflinching. You are the only one who saw me and did not turn away. Her chest tightened painfully. And you are the only one, he continued quieter now, who remained, without ever being asked. Silence, deep, irrevocable. I will not choose another woman, he said. I cannot. The Duchess's voice cut through. You will destroy her. He turned then, at last. To protect her from what? He asked. From being chosen, from being judged. She has been judged her entire life. The truth struck harder than anger, and she survived it. He continued. Without title, without protection. His gaze returned to Annabel. So I will not pretend she is weaker than the women you would place beside me. The Duchess said nothing, because for once, there was no immediate answer, only consequence. Richard stepped closer, close enough now that the world beyond them no longer mattered. I offer you nothing easy, he said quietly. No protection from what will follow. No certainty. Annabel felt tears rise, but she did not let them fall, because she understood. Every word, every cost. And still, he said, I choose you. The room held its breath. Not because you are suitable, not because you are expected, but because you are the only one who was never wrong. Her heart broke and healed in the same moment. Will you stand beside me? He asked, knowing exactly what it means. Annabelle closed her eyes briefly, because this was everything she had never allowed herself to hope for, and everything she feared. When she opened them again, she did not look at the Duchess, not at the room, only at him. Yes, she said, quiet, steady, certain, I will remain. The words changed everything. They were not married in London. There were no grand announcements, no ball, no approval, only silence and choice. Spring came slowly to Ashcombe Estate in Kent, where the air did not press so heavily against the walls, and the silence did not feel like something to endure. Annabelle stood by the open window, the wind moving gently through the room, carrying the scent of green fields and rain. Behind her, Richard entered without ceremony. No title, no distance, just presence. You are thinking, he said. She smiled faintly. I am learning how not to disappear. He stopped beside her. That was never required of you. No, she said softly. Only expected. A pause. Then, and you, she asked, what are you learning? He considered it, then answered with quiet honesty. That remaining is not the same as being alone. Annabelle turned toward him, and for the first time, there was no fear in it, only understanding. They had not changed the world. London still whispered, society still judged. But here, in the space they had chosen, silence no longer erased them, it held them together.